friends, this is Trish and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we're going to be talking about how gentle parenting does not always mix well with the classroom. Now I want to offer a quick disclaimer. There is no one definition for gentle parenting, and gentle parenting experts sometimes disagree with each other. And of course, some people are using the term gentle parenting to describe lazy or permissive parenting. So I'm aware that not every parent that follows some of these tactics are going to raise little monsters, but we are seeing some trends. And if you are a gentle parenting advocate, I hope you'll stick around and hear me out, because it's definitely possible that what is working for you at home may not be working for your child in a classroom environment. And we'll talk about why. But for those of you that actually don't know what gentle parenting is, I want to give you some tangible examples of what it might look like. In many gentle parenting communities, saying no is highly discouraged, and giving a child a direct command is also highly discouraged. The idea is to eliminate no and eliminate commands and instead ask questions or have discussions. So instead of saying, put your shoes on, it's time to go, you might ask the question, wouldn't your feet feel better outside with some shoes on it? In gentle parenting, oftentimes just about everything is negotiable. So that will often eliminate firm schedules and routines. And there's always lots of choices available. And traditional forms of discipline are highly looked down upon. So there's not traditional negative consequences like grounding a kid or taking away their video games. But there's also not necessarily positive reinforcement like sticker charts or rewards. And you'll find that a child's moods and preferences are highly prioritized when it comes to everyday life. Now here's where things get a little bit controversial. Temper tantrums and meltdowns are often validated, and that can even include hitting and kicking, because the focus is not so much on what a child is doing, but on the emotions and the reasons behind what they're doing. So if a child is yelling and screaming and throwing things, you might hear conversations around big feelings and validating those big feelings. In some gentle parenting camps, they are even discouraging traditional potty training. So a lot of teachers are finding that kids are coming in to school wearing diapers. You're not really going to find requirements to apologize. And there is a really big emphasis on the parents hiding their own feelings and emotions. So parents are not supposed to get angry, to look disappointed, to talk about how their child's behavior affects their feelings as parents. There's a big emphasis on parents being very calm and very happy at all times. And these themes can cross over into all areas of life. Some gentle parents would say there should never be requirements for kids to eat their vegetables, for example. There's a very wide spectrum in what you'll find in the gentle parenting community. And of course, not every single thing that gentle parents advocate for are terrible, but let's go ahead and move into why some of these things become problematic in the classroom. So first and foremost, there's often one teacher teaching 30 plus kids. In my teaching career, I taught every grade between 4th grade and 8th grade. And what works well for parents at home is completely impossible for a classroom teacher to do. Even though schools are actually pushing for a lot of these methods to replace traditional methods in schools today. But of course, in a classroom, there cannot be an infinite amount of choices. There are very rigid time requirements. There's classroom rules. There's learning targets that are often out of control of the teacher. There's assignments to be completed. There's class discussions to be had. A teacher's agenda is often packed from the time a student walks in to the time they leave the classroom. And we just don't have the ability to hear about the fact that a student doesn't like an assignment or doesn't want to do it. We don't have time to process with kids every time an emotion comes up. And we have to constantly think about how the actions of one student affect the entire classroom environment. To give you a silly example, I found that as a teacher, it was difficult to even tell a student that they needed to move to a different seat. They wanted to know why. They wanted to argue back. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to tell me that I was doing my job wrong, and on and on and on. And then I would often get emails from that kid's parent also wanting to know why I would dare ask their student to switch seats. Now, the tricky thing in a classroom is there could be 10 different reasons why a student is being asked to move. And some of those I may not even be able to share with a student. For example, seats might have to change because of a student's IEP or 504 plan. There might be a bullying situation going on in the classroom where I need to separate students. And it could be as simple as two kids are sitting together and they distract each other and get each other off task. But I shouldn't have to explain all of that every single time I need to move somebody's seat. Even if they weren't the one doing anything wrong, a teacher has to have the ability to make simple decisions like that in the classroom. But with a gentle parented generation, it seems like the smallest things that a teacher asks a student to do turns into some kind of crazy debate, which leads to difficulty with classroom management in general. As a teacher, I found it very hard to set firm rules, boundaries, and consequences because somebody was always pushing back. It was often the students or their parents or the parents complaining to administrators, which would make me change my rules again. And call me crazy, but I genuinely believe that the teacher is responsible for the safety and the education of an entire group of kids. So if we can't set rules to keep students safe, to keep the learning environment functioning, then we effectively can't do our job, but we're the ones that are responsible and in trouble if things go wrong. So a teacher has to have authority. And these days you would think that authority is a cuss word. And this is another issue that I've seen with gentle parenting philosophies. With gentle parenting, there's often not a clear authority figure. So a lot of times students have no concept of not being the boss and not being in charge. Now, don't get me wrong, all people are equal in value and worth, but all people are not equal in roles. And when children leave high school and they decide to go into college or have a career, they're going to have a boss. And I think we're doing students such a disservice by not teaching them how to deal with rules, procedures, structures, and even time management. But it seems like these days all of those things are up for debate. Sadly, this also leads to a lot of entitlement. Now, naturally, kids are self-centered creatures by nature. Their brain is not fully developed until around the age of 25. So it's understandable that kids are going to be very self-focused, and that's why it's the job of parents to teach children how their attitudes and their choices and their words impact other people. But teachers are really seeing that kids are lacking these skills. It's like every kid wants to come in and create their own learning experience, which means some kids want to lay on the floor, some kids want to sing and drum on the tables, some kids want to sleep, and there's kind of no concept that that behavior isn't appropriate in all context. A lot of these challenges really leads to a lack of resilience and coping skills. When kids never hear no, they don't learn that the universe doesn't revolve around them. When kids aren't sometimes made to do hard things at home like chores and homework and going to bed on time, they cannot cope when they are in environments that require them to do hard things for their own good. And we've been kids. We know that if life was left up to a kid, most kids would probably eat Cheetos all day, watch TV or play video games all night, wake up sometime in the afternoon, and they might never brush their teeth. So it's up to parents to teach kids, hey, there's some things that really aren't that fun, but they're for your good in the future. And when kids refuse to do those things, there has to be consequences in place in order to help them learn. But it seems like gentle parenting is really moving away from that idea. Teachers are also seeing that kids are having a lot of difficulty with peer-to-peer relationships. It seems like they cannot share, they cannot cooperate, they cannot get along with people that are different than them. And this is not just little kids. Again, I taught 4th through 8th grade. So by that age, they should be learning to get along with others. But sometimes I felt like half the class was just trying to manage kids' interpersonal disputes because they were lacking age-appropriate maturity. One of the hardest things about the gentle parenting craze is a lack of accountability. And again, these philosophies are actually moving into schools. So kids act out and do really harmful things, and the only thing that happens to them is they have a conversation with an adult. They talk about their feelings are validated. They talk about what they might be able to do differently in the future, and that's it. So I'm really worried for the next generation, whether it's Gen Alpha or Gen Z. And I think society is already starting to see the effects of what this looks like. Every once in a while on YouTube, I'll watch those police officer videos where people get pulled over for doing something, and the excuses that people have are unbelievable. The way that people talk to officers is unbelievable. And I even watched an episode one time where a teenager or young adult, I don't know how old he was, his mom basically showed up and was trying to talk to the officer and negotiate with the officer about why their child shouldn't have any consequences. So slowly but surely, we're seeing the effect of these discipline philosophies, which really amounts to no discipline at all. And naturally, this is gonna reflect itself in academic performance. It seems like the whole internet's talking about how Gen Alpha and sometimes Gen Z cannot read. They're scoring terrible on tests, but it's really simple. Students are lacking discipline and they're not being made to do their homework. They're not being made to read at home. They're getting the choice to be on iPads for hours. They're getting the choice to go to bed whenever they want to. And we're seeing a lot of the same issues in school. The last year that I taught in April of 2021, I remember that about 90% of my class was not turning in assignments. I taught English to 6th graders and it was awful. Yet there was nothing I could do about it. Kids would pass no matter what. Administrators always had excuses for people. This was during the time where we were doing both a hybrid of in-person and online learning. So at this point, kids that were in person were only attending school 2 days a week. So they had 5 days to get their assignments done, yet nobody was doing it. And the kids that were learning online had 7 days out of the week at home and they just had to log in for a few classes twice a week. And yet 90% of my students were not doing their work. Yet teachers will be the ones to get blamed for the terrible test scores that are happening. But again, there's no consequences anywhere. So in my opinion, it's a vicious cycle. We're seeing gentle parenting trends. And I believe that in many ways, schools are responding to parents. They know that they're going to get a lot of pushback if they suspend kids, if they fail kids. There's a million excuses. So schools are trying to emulate how parents are dealing with their kids at home. I still remember the 1 year that I taught 8th grade. I was having a serious conversation with a student about the fact that they were lying to me. And that student went home and told his mom about what a horrible person I am for calling him out on lying. And then the mom came and talked to me and she looked me in the eyes and said, I don't even tell my child that they lie. So I'm not sure why you think that would work for you. And I wasn't entirely sure what to say to that. Maybe I come from a different universe, but I remember even in nursery rhymes and little storybooks, we were taught the virtues of not lying. You know, like with little stories like The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. And it's kind of weird. I genuinely don't know if a lot of modern parents are even teaching their kids basic morals. So when they hear it and they get called out from somebody else, it's the most shocking thing that's ever happened to them. So at the end of the day, yes, it is very frustrating for teachers to deal with, but I think a lot of our greater concerns is for the kids themselves. Don't get me wrong. I love the fact that a lot of parents, especially millennial parents, are really thinking about the impact of their words and their behavior, and they're trying to be conscious with their discipline, and that is beautiful. But as with most things, it seems like the pendulum has just swung to the complete opposite extreme of authoritarian parenting, and now we have something that is completely permissive, weak parenting. But many of these people have the best of intentions. On my last video, I had somebody comment to me and they told me that they never told their kid no to anything, and yet their kid was doing really well. And that might be the case. I think there's some kids that have a really compliant personality. They're quiet, they're agreeable. So I don't know, maybe gentle parenting works on a very, very specific type of person, but I do wonder what life is like for that kid who has never been told no when they go out into the real world. What will it be like for them when they get their first job and they're told no? I've also noticed that some of these parenting philosophies make kids very unable to receive negative feedback or constructive criticism. And that's a part of life that we all have to deal with. So I think there has to be a middle ground. I am totally in favor of being gentle and kind in tone, in demeanor. And of course, I'm all for parents being loving and thoughtful toward their kids. But I think that a lot of people in this generation have redefined discipline and negative consequences as something that is totally traumatic for kids. And I completely disagree with that. I think being told no is healthy. I think kids learning that they're not always going to get their way is healthy. And I think sometimes punitive consequences are necessary. I'm not talking about extreme ones, but in the good old days, you know, we got grounded, technology was taken away from us, we lost privileges. And in school, there was things like detention and ISS, and people could actually fail the grade. And it seems like a certain segment of society is trying to get rid of all of those things. And the results are disastrous. That's why there's so many Gen Alpha videos out right now and Gen Z videos videos out right now, because slowly but surely these kids are getting unleashed on society, whether it's the classroom or whether it's Sephora or just retail stores, and the results are alarming. I think it's become controversial to say that kids do not know what is best for them at a young age, and if we just give them choices on everything, they may not always choose the best thing. I am all for having conversations with kids. I'm all for hearing their thoughts and their feelings and treating them respectfully, but I also think that the parent is the authority figure and they are in charge, and there are some things that are absolutely not negotiable. And I don't think teaching obedience should be considered a cuss word. Yes, we can teach kids to think for themselves, and we can teach kids to appeal respectfully in the right time, in the right place if they have questions about something, but I have very rarely seen this done well. What I have seen instead is, forgive me for saying this, but a lot of bratty, entitled, rude, disrespectful, obnoxious kids. I'd even hurt to say it out loud, but it's the truth, guys. So if I have parents watching, I hope I have not offended you guys too much, but I really hope to get people to think about how their parenting style translates to the rest of the world. Because unless you're gonna homeschool your kids and employ them for the rest of their lives, they will have to interact with a world that doesn't look a whole lot like gentle parenting. And at the end of the day, we want to do what is best for kids. We want them to be resilient. We want them to be able to cope with life. We want them to have mental health. And a world without firm boundaries and consequences is actually a scary place for kids. And I think the results of this experiment will be seen for generations to come. And truthfully, a lot of millennial parents are actually burning out from this unrealistic parenting style, and we are getting a generation of iPad kids because parents just can't keep this up because it's not realistic and it's not healthy. But with all of that said, I like to keep an open mind, so I would love to hear from gentle parenting advocates if you've seen it done well. I am all ears. I know I have a few viewers that say that they do gentle parenting, so I hope I'm not just knocking it without knowledge of it. I did the best research I could, and I'm gonna be listening to some gentle parenting audiobooks. I've recently learned about Mona Delahawk and Sarah Ockwell Smith. So I want to keep learning, and I'm happy to do a follow-up to this video if there's any interest for it. And I hope my delivery was gentle. I want to give a quick thank you to all of my new subscribers. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate all the comments that you leave. And I'd love to hear from you about this topic and any other topics that you'd like to hear about in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.